Last week, I dove into my favorite graphic novel series, Earth 1, starting with Superman Volume 1, First Steps. So if you want to check that out, check out that link right there. This week, I'm super excited to get into Superman Volume 2 and dig into this one, man. This is awesome. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my spoiler talk comic book review for Superman Earth 1 Volume 2. This one, I had only read this one once before. I've read the first one a couple times, so I went back to reread this, and I forgot just how good it is. It's so good how it digs into the different characters, and, the last graphic novel is the origin story of Superman. This one is right after he's revealed to the world, right after he saved the world, and it's all about the world's reaction to him. If you haven't checked out any of this Earth 1 series, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, I highly recommend it. Links for those are in my description. I have the Amazon links there, plus, you get the graphic novel through that Amazon link. It comes back to help support Durbania, so I'd be incredibly grateful there. But they're also excellent graphic novels, and if you like these kind of graphic novels, you like these DC comic heroes, I think you'd really like this. I think even if you're not a DC fan, I think you would still just dig the stories. They're really good. So there's my 2 cents on it. Let's dive into this. So like I was saying earlier, one of the interesting things that they do with Superman in this story is, how is the world reacting to him? How does America react to him? How do other nations react to his existence? And, they make points in this series that, places like China and Russia, they're banning Superman from ever coming over to their borders. So it's kind of an interesting thing to look at countries, to look at nations being like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? He just kind of does what he wants and when he wants. No, we are closing our borders to him. He's not going to come over here and do what he wants when he wants. Which, honestly, if I was to take a good, honest look at this world, I definitely think that's how the world would react to a being of that much power. I mean, even in America, they're sitting here having discussions about, okay, apparently this guy's gonna act. We don't know how to stop him, but we've got to figure something out. We got to figure out how to put limits on him. We got to figure out how to get him to answer to somebody. This guy just can't act, can he? And so the whole world is just kind of in a tizzy about who Superman is. They don't even know the full extent of his powers, but in watching him fight off the alien invasion from the first graphic novel, they know this is a powerful dude. They know he's capable of so much, and it makes them scared. The other thing that's really interesting is, they go through the talk show circuit, all those news opinion talk shows where they talk about the news of the day. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting is you have one of those talk panels and they're sitting around there and this guy cracks this joke. He's like, oh yeah, he could just be out here for all good and really want to help for the sake of helping because he's that selfless. And then the next panel, there's a pause, and the panel after that, they're all cracking up like, that's such a great joke. But what I think it's a great illustration of, the world can't accept good for the sake of good. The world can't believe in that. The world can't believe somebody would walk into this world and be selfless and want to do good because it's right to do good and not do it for some form of recognition or for some form of reward or for some form of payback. So, everybody's kind of just waiting for that moment of, why are you really doing this, Superman? And so I thought that was really cool, but it really gets into Superman's frustration because he honestly just wants to help. The end of the last graphic novel, he found his calling. The end of the last graphic novel, he's put on his uniform. He puts it on and he puts on purpose, and he's excited about it. This island, I think you pronounce it Borata, has a tsunami. And so he flies over to this island nation to save the people. But the guy that's a leader there is a military leader, and he's one of those corrupt dictator leaders. And as Superman is saving people from the tsunami and saving people from drowning, this leader shows up and he confronts Superman. And he basically says, get out of here. And this guy is such an evil dictator, he drops a severed arm on the ground. And he goes, this is what I can do, and I can do it without hesitation. So the longer you're here, the more people I'm going to do this to, and every person past this person, it'll be your fault because you didn't leave. Superman's like, no, I'm not trying to do anything political. People are drowning in the tsunami. I'm just trying to help people. And this guy just gets right back in Superman's face without fear, and he's like, leave my country and don't come back, or I will kill more people the longer you're here. The one with the most guns has the most power, and that's me. So Superman flies off angry. He's sitting in the Daily Planet at his desk, and the news is going about the death toll continuously rising on this island nation. And because of this corrupt dictator, he can't cross the borders and just save people. So it's all about the fact that no matter what he does, just by acting, by virtue of him being so powerful, it's like a political thing. It throws everybody into a tizzy. But he's just trying to help. That's all he's trying to do. And so this graphic novel, it's showing his mounting frustration with, I'm just trying to be good because it's the right thing to do. And it's not like we get this angry, dark Superman out of this, but I think what we're getting is a very real frustration that can rise up when you're really trying to be good. And not only are people not grateful for the goodness you're doing, but they have animosity towards it. So this is where the world is with Superman, and this is where Superman is with the world. Like, we start off good, he has purpose, and then he goes to save this island nation, and then the dictator kicks him out, and now he's filled with frustration because he can't do anything to that dictator because it's a huge political thing. Like, his goal is not to be political, his goal is just to help. So it was very interesting digging into that whole aspect of this. The other thing that was incredibly interesting in this graphic novel is the relationship between Clark Kent and Lois Lane. I didn't talk about it a lot in the first graphic novel because there's not a whole lot there. Superman shows up, Lois is kind of taken with him, but taken with him in the way the whole world is. So there's no real, like, relationship blossoming between Lois and Superman yet. And between Lois and Clark, they're really just co-workers. They don't even have a foundation of friendship. But when this graphic novel picks up, at the end of the last graphic novel, Clark Kent interviewed Superman. He got an exclusive interview, and that's what got him his job at the Daily Planet. So we picked that up right here with this one, and what's really interesting about it is how Lois Lane can't accept that, because why would somebody like Superman give that much personal detail about himself and his life and who he is to somebody who's not working for any of the news media, period? Why would Clark be granted this, honor and privilege? Why would Clark be granted this exclusive? Why would Superman give that to him when he's not proven and he's not a reporter and he's had no experience in it? So it's about her investigation into Clark's life. And what I thought was really interesting about her investigation, so we touch on this in graphic novel number 1, where we see Superman is kind of withdrawn from the world because he feels like he's an outsider. He's outside, he's looking in, and he feels like he's never going to belong, and he wants to belong so much. Well, this one dives deeper into that. Because one of the things we touched on in Volume 1 is Superman remembers everything. Superman doesn't forget anything. And he's super smart. Everything about him is super, so he takes in knowledge, man, and he just has it. He is a super genius on top of everything else. So, of course, he's a straight-A student. But, as we figured out in graphic novel 1, people are picking on him because he's different. They don't know what's different. They don't know what he's hiding, but they can sense that aloofness. They can sense his differentness, so he gets bullied. And part of the reasons he gets bullied is because of all his straight A's. So what Lois finds is after that, he had nothing but straight C's. Like, perfect straight C's. In other words, she can tell, like, nobody has grades like this. He put effort into being average and nothing else. So she breaks into all his personal files, both at work and everywhere else. She even calls his teacher from, like, junior high and high school in Smallville, and she's like, tell me about Clark. And she's like, well, he was a straight-A student. And then he got picked on for it. And because he was different and everybody could see that he was different, he intentionally dropped his grades to try to be more average. To me, that was such an interesting character study to get deeper and deeper into Clark Kent and who he is and why he is the way he is. It just added so much to his character. And we're seeing how this stuff would build from his childhood up to now, how somebody like this would exist in our world. And I think that it was so smart and so well done. And then, of course, at the end of this, that teacher calls Clark and goes, hey, how did everything go? And, she talks about how Lois called. So this is like the most relationship we start to get between Clark and Lois, and it doesn't even happen to the end of the graphic novel. Lois gives up researching Clark because she just figures, I can't solve this mystery, but I can tell he's a genuinely good guy. And he had a hard go of it, and because of his exceptionalness and then having to act average, somehow he got Superman's attention. And she decides to let it go because she decides he's a good guy. And inevitably, that's when Clark gets the call from his teacher that he's being investigated. And, the teacher didn't word it that way because the teacher was a little deceived. But the point is, he's like, what? So now we have this weird relationship between Clark and Lois because Clark knows Lois was investigating him. And Clark, kind of just saw her as a coworker and a friend, but now he's like, okay, what's going on with you now? So this kind of begins that relationship with Clark and Lois. Which kind of brings me into the next interesting thing, that Clark, while not having a relationship with Lois, is having a relationship. He moves into this building, renting this room, and meets this girl named Lisa Lazale. Is that how you say it? Lazale? Lazale. I'm going to say Lazale. I am. I'm probably saying it wrong, but just to be honest with you, my first introduction to this character, period, has been this graphic novel, and nobody's actually saying her last name out loud. And I'm from Ohio. Sometimes we pronounce hills heels, so I am not the most reliable source for pronouncing words. Point is, this girl Lisa, first off, I like the fact that her initials are LL. All of Superman's greatest loves and all his greatest enemies have the initials LL. In this comic, it's Lisa Lazale. In the other comics, it's Lana Lang. It's always also Lois Lane, and then his greatest enemy, Lex Luthor. So his greatest loves and his greatest villains always seem to have those initials LL. And I like that they kept that alive with this, because they start to build towards this being Clark's first real relationship. She's like a neighbor of his, and, you know, it's interesting because she's sort of a prostitute on the side. Not sort of. She is a prostitute on the side. She has like a job, but when she can't make rent, she does the prostitution thing. And I think the point of them bringing up that she's a prostitute is you have Clark, who is this bright light, this incredibly moral guy, and then you have this girl that is just really struggling with her life, and it's supposed to be interesting, the dynamic between these two. And it also brings up the dynamic of Clark, you know, wanting intimacy. But because he's super and he's a man of steel and normal people are not like that, it kind of digs deeper into this fear that he has of physically hurting people. I feel really weird having this conversation, gosh. But, you know, the point is it's showing you that with Clark, nothing is simple in life. He has to second guess everything he does because what if he hurts somebody? And so that's kind of what's going on here, but he genuinely likes this girl. And now this bright light is impacting her in a more positive way. So, like, that is also a very interesting relationship that they put in this story. Our villain in this is Parasite, and I thought this was really interesting, the way they did the character of Parasite. Because basically, it's an accident in Star Labs that turns this guy, Ray, into Parasite. And so they do more background with Ray than I think I've ever seen. Like, you know, I've seen Parasite and Superman, the animated series. They bring him up slightly in Smallville and things like that. So this is kind of like more of a deeper thing that I've seen. But, you know, I like how Earth 1 does dig deeper into things and tries to do things different with the story. Like, you get to Ray, and this kid was messed up as a kid. Like, he killed dogs and animals because it was fun and interesting to him. When he grew up, it became killing people because it was fun and it was interesting to him. He met this guy who worked at Star Labs, worked in this division of like decomposing stuff. And so he's like, oh, cool, let's be partners and you use your technology and kill or, you know, eradicate my victims from existence so nobody can tie anything back to me or us now because you're in on it. And then he ends up killing that guy because that guy gets really weird. That's neither here nor there. The point is, in this Star Labs accident, he gets hit by all this neutron energy, and so now he needs energy. Like, he has to touch car batteries to absorb the energy. He has to touch another human being to absorb their energy and life force just to maintain life in himself. And what they did really interesting with the character of Parasite in this, and I thought it was perfect for the second villain in this series, because he has to come up against Superman. So Superman's thinking, okay, whatever. So he goes to fight this guy, and suddenly Parasite sucks the life force out of Superman. And now, for the first time in Superman's existence, he has no powers. Now, they do that a lot in Smallville. Like, every episode where they don't know what else to do, they do a episode where Clark loses his powers, and it gets annoying. It's the whole plot of the Christopher Reeve Superman 2, where he gives up his powers to be with Lois. So this is not an unfamiliar concept, but what I really enjoyed was the approach of that concept in this. Because it's not like he lost his powers permanently and had to do something magic to get them back. No, he gets his power from the sun. What this guy did was suck the powers out of Superman, so he had Superman's powers, and Superman just needed time to recharge. He's a battery, he just had to recharge. And so, during that time, though, when he had no charge, when he had no powers, you have all these panels of him, like, he's trying to cross the street and a car zooms by and it freaks him out. I mean, people come by and they push him and, you know, so like every little thing is now a terror to him because what he's taken for granted. So while he sits there and he's afraid of hurting people with this, that, or the other, while he's afraid of what his powers can do in hurting people. He's never thought about for 1 second what it's like to be vulnerable. He's never thought about for 1 second what it's to be like to walk out your front door and anything could injure you. Anything could kill you. Anything could change your life in a heartbeat. He's never experienced that in his life. And so for the very first time, he's feeling that vulnerability. He's actually getting that feeling of being human. And so the way that this graphic novel illustrated that, I thought was brilliant. So he gets his powers back. He flies back to the North Pole. He goes to his ship that is starting to build the fortress because it can generate mass and things like that. And so he talks to the ship. The ship helps create this like energy shield that he could put around himself so that he could protect himself in a parasite fight. The moment he puts the shield on, he can absorb no extra solar radiation. So now there's a risk that he could be fighting this guy who has Superman's powers and not be able to recharge, so he might die. Or if his powers, if Parasite gets through the shield and takes his powers while the shield is still on him, he can't recharge, and it might damage his ability to recharge, and he might die or just be normal and never have powers again. So it's interesting how Superman has to take that risk, and he has to do it. So, like, that is such an interesting thing. The other thing is Ray, Parasite, he had a sister. And so, you know, all through his life, Ray kind of justified things by, I'm doing this for my sister, I'm making money for my sister, I'm killing people because I have this weird fascination with it, but I get money by doing it, and I, you know, take care of my sister. Well, when he's Parasite, the thing that defeats him isn't Superman. And I thought that was just so interesting. Like, I mean, he and Superman have a great fight. And just before, you know, Parasite constantly needs to recharge. He burns the energy faster than Superman does. So he takes Superman's powers, and he's excited to have them. And so now we're seeing what evil can do with the same power set that good can do when good has it. So now we're seeing evil be evil with the power set, where Superman is good with the power set. But now the world is fearful because they know Parasite has Superman's powers, and now they're seeing the full extent of Superman's powers because Parasite's like having a blast with this. So now the world even more so is like, oh my gosh, this guy can wipe out 7 billion people on this earth in less than a week. That is how powerful this is. And so Parasite, like, needs to get a recharge, so he's here to fight Superman to get that charge again, and Superman is, like, fighting, but Parasite, like, breaks the shield and starts to get the charge. It's Parasite's sister who shows up. She shows up. She tries to talk nice to him, and Ray gives her a hug, but he can't touch another human being without absorbing their power, so he kills his own sister. And then, you know, in that distraction, Superman gives the final blow that knocks him out. But I really considered in the story that it was Parasite's sister that was his downfall, and not really Superman winning. But it was interesting. But what's really interesting is, like I said, how Parasite is now using Superman's powers for evil. The government, our government, and in this fictitious story, our government is fearful of Superman. And so really what it is, it's some key people in our government. So they're studying Parasite because they want to find Superman's weaknesses. So they come up with a couple theories of the origin of Superman's powers by studying Parasite. And one of the theories, it's not the most popular theory that the government has, but it's one of them, that he gets his powers from the sun. And so, you know, they're trying to figure out ways to alter light so that they can find ways to weaken Superman. And so, like, they're studying Parasite to figure out how to take down Superman. And it's this one general, Colonel Lee, that she really wants the government to have the ability to kill Superman. And she says it because it's a safeguard, but you could just tell there's a maliciousness behind it. And she was part of the team that had the ship for 20 years before it flew off to Superman. And so she has no trust for him whatsoever, especially after seeing what Parasite could do with his powers. So her whole goal is to study the powers to figure out how to destroy Superman. So what she does is she goes to hire the two most brilliant physicists she could imagine to help. And those two brilliant physicists are Lex Luthor and his wife, Alexandra Luthor, who she says, call us Lex Squared, which I think is a very unique take on the Luthors. We've seen so many takes on the Luthors, and what I like about this spin is the way this graphic novel goes. Alexandra is really thinking about killing Superman. Like, she wants him dead. And Lex is like, but what has he done that would deserve death? I mean, I understand caution, but you're kind of just, what has he done to deserve death and this much distrust? He's only done good in the world. And so to see that it's Alexandra Luthor with this malicious heart towards Superman, and Lex like, well, all right, let's be cautious, but you don't need to be like that. That was a very interesting dynamic. And so the first time I read this, it made me more excited to get into the third novel because I wanted to get deeper into that relationship between Lex and his wife and see who's the real mastermind here. And it was just an interesting setup. And what I like is if you're going to reboot something, why reboot it and make it the same as the time before? And this is a very interesting take on Lex Luthor with two Lex Luthors, a Lex squared as they say in here. So I thought that was such an interesting take, and it really was well done in the third graphic novel. But that's a review for another day. Again, I'm giving this one an A+. Reading it the second time through, I enjoyed it more than the first graphic novel just because I enjoyed the territory that it explored with Superman and his relationships. I like the ending conclusion that when he lost his powers and he felt that vulnerability, he said to himself, my mission in life is not to worry about what people think of me, but it's to be a protector, so that people don't have to feel this scared or vulnerable. And so that epiphany that he has is so interesting. So they do a lot of great things with it. They dig into things so deeply. And I've talked a long time, but that's how passionate I am about this one. I really like Superman Earth 1 Volume 2 A+. If you've read this graphic novel series, what are your thoughts about it? Let me know in the comments. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian. Next to the subscribe button, hit the bell so you're notified when I drop my comic book review for Volume 3 of Superman Earth 1. Following that, Batman Earth 1 Volume 1 and going into that one. So I'm very excited to be digging into this Earth 1 series and talking about it here. And if there's a comic book or graphic novel you'd like me to read and review, let me know that in the comments as well. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.